With shadows, echoes in the night, soft and haunting, flickering light. Strings pull tight, drums beat loud. In the silence, hear the crowd.
Okay, hello everybody. Today we're inaugurating a podcast series which is from the Humanities Department. My name is Dr. Germaine Murray, and I think we have so much talent in our department and also in the college that what I really wanted to do is sort of tap into some of that talent. And one of the big things that I'm interested in is film literacy, so we're going to talk about that today. This podcast series is going to be called The Core of the Matter. And that's a shout out to Kent Bousman, who came up with the title. And so my first guest today on this beautiful Friday rainy afternoon is Dr. Jess Bowers, who is a colleague of mine in the English department here at Maryville University. And she, like me, is a film nut. Film fanatic, and by the way, has credentials in film studies. So today we're going to talk about film literacy. We're going to talk about, and then move into a really special event we're going to have called Maryville Talks Movies, November 7th, where Jess will be presenting Nosferatu, the 1922 first version, and we will also have a live soundtrack. So I want her to introduce herself because I couldn't do her justice. So Jess, give us a brief intro.
That's very kind, Germaine. Am I on here? I think I am. I'm Dr. Jess Bowers, Associate Professor of English and Humanities, and Germaine is absolutely right. I am a huge film buff, particularly the silent era is my favorite era to talk about, and so we've been very fortunate in that we've been able to slip some silent films into the Maryville Talks Movies curriculum every fall, which has been so fun for me to expose our students and our campus community to silent film and the art of silent film. Credential-wise, I got my PhD from University of Missouri, where one of the things I specialized in was film studies, particularly adaptation studies. So I'm always really interested in how does a work change in that transfer from book to film, and always interested in kind of getting people away from the idea of fidelity, right? Like it's not, the movie wasn't as good as the book. Well, but let's take the movie on its own terms. And Nosferatu is it is an adaptation of Dracula, an unauthorized adaptation of Dracula. And so now that we're in spooky season, it seemed like Nosferatu was the best silent film to present this time around. And we are so thrilled because on November 7th at 6:15, we're going to have a live band playing the score for Nosferatu. This is a very special opportunity. The band is called the Rats and People Motion Picture Orchestra, and it's a ragtag group of musicians from all around St. Louis area. They've been doing this for over a decade, and they compose original scores to accompany silent film. So in the past, they've done Go West, Buster Keaton for us, and they have also done Nosferatu for us before. But this is the first time we've had them back on campus since COVID-19, and so it's so exciting to just bring this event back to campus. So really excited about that.
Oh yeah, I am too. And what I love about this is when we Jess loves the silent era, and what I love about it is when you did Go West,
yes,
the students absolutely loved it. It was the first experience for them, many of them seeing a silent film, but also a live soundtrack.
Yes.
Which is really a special thing. Now, I wanted to say something before we get into Nosferatu, talking about Nosferatu. I also wanted to say this is the 11th year that we've done this series.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something?
That's so cool.
We missed the 10th anniversary last year.
Goodness.
But anyway, I know.
We were busy.
We were busy, yeah. But it's the 11th year. We've presented in the series about 125 films. We've never duplicated any film but for one, and that's In the Heat of the Night. That is such a great movie that I felt I had to do it again. So I'm really excited about this because we want to make this a community event. The whole purpose of the series, by the way, was to make it a community event. And so the public is actually invited to all of this. And we really, and film buffs are really invited. We have a wonderful sound system now in the university auditorium. And so it's going to sound really good. So let's get started. For many people out there who've never seen Nosferatu,
yes,
the 1922 version.
1922 version, it is being remade this year.
I know,
and it looks fascinating. I'm really excited to see.
Who's directing it?
Gosh,
I don't remember
off the top of my head.
But well, that's okay. So it's been remade. Okay, so it was the first. It's based on Bram Stoker's novel, The 1922.
Yeah.
Very controversial about that, and we can talk about that.
It's Robert Eggers, the new one.
Okay,
is the director.
Okay, very good. It's a groundbreaking film for all kinds of reasons, and I wonder if you want to go into that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, Nosferatu. It's an amazing, amazing movie. It's sort of one of the 100-pound gorillas of a movement that we call German Expressionism. And this is a silent film movement that sort of came into being rather early on in the invention of film and continued on until really World War II-ish. And this style of filmmaking is really important because of, well, first of all, its visual appeal. This is a film style that emphasizes the fantastical, the strange, the subconscious, right? So when you watch Nosferatu, what you'll see is that the sets and the places that these people inhabit have a surreal, unsettling quality, right? All of the angles are sort of tilted in a strange way. There's a lot of sharp lines in the composition of each scene. And this all adds to sort of the sense of dread that we feel as we're watching the movie, but also incredibly influential in terms of how horror movies are made today. Every time I watch a Tim Burton film, I am so struck by how much he's stealing from Nosferatu, just in terms of, and it's a loving homage, I think. It is. Absolutely. Yeah. But, when you watch Nosferatu, you can see the seeds of so many of the horror films that people love today and see as strikingly original. Well, actually, they were inspired by this thing from 1922. The other thing that's really special about Nosferatu, I think, is the performance of the main monster, right? Count Orlok, who they had to use that name for Count Dracula because Bram Stoker's widow did not want an adaptation of Dracula to be made, did not authorize this.
Yeah.
So Count Orlok is played by a German actor named Max Schreck, which it's always amused me greatly that translated into English his name means great horror. Isn't that wild?
It is. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And he was actually like a leading man, a sex symbol, really seen as this super attractive guy. But for Nosferatu, the makeup that they put Max Schreck in to play Count Orlok is some of the most astounding movie makeup I think I've ever seen. It holds up.
Yes, it does hold up.
It holds up. Mm-hmm. He is still terrifying, unnerving. And so much of it, I think, has to do with the physicality that Schreck brought to the role. There's almost a mime-like quality to
a lot of people compare his work or that work in there to a dance.
Yes.
To a dance. I know Rita Moreno, the great dancer, the great Hispanic dancer, Max Schreck and also Boris Karloff.
Yes.
She said their movements are lyrical.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought so too.
Yeah, he looms, he hovers, he haunts this film.
Right.
And so for my money, and I always tell my students this whenever I teach the film, it's one of the most scary things I've ever seen. Now, it's not scary in the way that a modern horror movie is scary. It's more haunting. haunting, right? And I think that for me is what the power of Nosferatu as a film is it haunts you. There's something really eerie and unnerving.
Well, it's a very different thing that to the kind of thing we have today, which is mostly what we get is the real scary, gory,
the jump scare,
gory stuff. And it's a build, and it's also it's 100% haunting the entire time. It's not. But it also builds at the same time. There's something very poetical, about the film itself. And Murnau was a relatively young man when he made this film.
Yeah, this is one of his earlier films. He's much more sort of critically renowned for things like The Last Laugh that come later in his career. But I just think Nosferatu is such a striking achievement, particularly, as a silent film buff, when I compare it to what was happening in America at the same time, right? If you watch like the films of D.W. Griffith, who was the most prominent silent director in America at the time, and, he's doing some things that are technically pretty interesting. But then you look at Murnau, you look at what's happening in Europe during the silent era, and they are taking risks that a lot of American directors weren't willing to take. And I think part of the reason is that, a movie like Nosferatu, it's not about dialogue. It's not about characters really talking to each other. It's more about vibes than anything else. And
it's about feeling.
Yes. And American films during the silent era were very much kind of pointing towards sound. Like they wanted to emphasize conversations with intertitles and all that kind of thing. Whereas, Nosferatu, it really, he just lets the camera roll and lets the performances carry.
That's
the
right.
Movie.
He was relatively young. He read Stoker's novel and just thought, this is highly cinematic, which I find really interesting.
Yes.
Or highly, he thought it would translate really well. And as you mentioned, Florence Stoker, he did not consult with Florence Stoker. So what he thought he could get away with doing this by just changing names.
Right.
And then there's a whole controversy about, she takes him to court.
Yeah.
And she realizes, because he's a poor filmmaker.
He is.
We also want to make very clear here that Murnau was not... He didn't have a massive budget. He was really an experimenter, an entrepreneur, this was an artistic innovation. And so he didn't have any. So when she went after him, it was. She realized she wasn't going to get any money out of it. So what she wanted is all the films destroyed, and so the European films were destroyed. The American films were not.
Interesting.
And so that's why we have
a print.
We have Nosferatu.
Wow.
That's why we have Nosferatu.
That's so amazing.
And which is too funny, I think. I mean, in a way, it's really bizarre. So, which is so. And by the way, it wasn't a popular film when it came out.
No.
It was not popular necessarily with audiences, right? It was popular with the many critics.
Yes. And then the French New Wave guys were really the ones that kind of took it up later on.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
When they were sort of revisiting the history of film and looking at it and trying to decide what was valuable. This was a big favorite of the French New Wave. And I think, again, it's this atmospheric quality that this movie has. One of the other things that I really admire about this movie that is very unusual for 1922 is the way that the female protagonist, Ellen, is handled throughout this movie. She's both a victim,
very good,
and she's the one who... she's kind of the adult in the room of this movie. Like, she's the one who understands the danger of what's happening with this vampire coming into their community. And, in the end, she's the one who ends up making the hard decision that saves everyone. Whereas the male protagonist, Hooter, is Well, I mean, for me, he's a great source of comic relief whenever I watch this movie.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I do think it's important to note that, Nosferatu is funny, too. I don't know if it's unintentionally funny or
No,
if it's
it's
just
German funny.
Yeah.
And I hate, I don't want to stereotype or anything, but there is a certain kind of German humor that it's very dark.
Yes, it's very dark.
And so it definitely comes through.
It comes through, and Hooter in this movie, he's the opposite of a heroic protagonist. He's sort of childlike, feckless, naive, kind of goes along with what everyone tells him.
Who's he supposed to be the counterpart for? Is it? I can't remember.
Harker?
Is it Harker?
Yeah,
yes, it's Harker in Dracula.
Harker. And he's so ineffectual that I see him as the progenitor of all these characters that we see in horror movies who we yell at the screen. What are you doing?
Don't go in there.
Yeah, don't go in there.
Why are you going in that garage? Yeah.
Because,
exactly.
When you watch Nosferatu, it definitely sets, like the audience clearly knows that this guy is, Count Orlok is bad news, and yet Hooter is oblivious in just a delightful way.
I think, well, and I do think there's humor here.
Yes.
And the humor, if you pick up on it, really kind of cuts the sense of haunting dread that overhangs the film.
Yes.
Now, one of the reasons I'm going to make sure, okay, you're hearing me. One of the reasons I started this series was because I had noticed in class a long time ago, so this wasn't a new issue, that students you can't make film references in class anymore. You can't even make film references maybe that are like even 10 years old.
Yeah.
You can make, or even current, because it's got to fit into, we're also balkanized when it comes to what we watch. So I thought, this is a way for us to create a class and also a series where we introduce different colleagues introduce from their own perspectives and disciplinary perspectives a film. And so and a film of cultural significance. This most definitely is, because it starts really the modern film horror genre, and it also starts the whole Dracula vampiric theme that is still incredibly popular today.
So popular.
So it really, and by the way, with its iconography, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So film literacy to me is film studies is very important, but film literacy to me is like very, very. To me, it's important as literary.
Yeah,
literacy.
and knowing how to read visual content.
Absolutely.
Right? One of my most profound experiences when I was an undergraduate was taking a film studies course, and it really felt like having the scales ripped from my eyes in terms of understanding that, okay, there's more to a movie than just what happened in it, okay? There's angles, there's lighting. Every choice that the director has made reinforces the story, reinforces the themes of the film. And particularly when you watch films that are critically acclaimed, like Nosferatu, those choices are brilliant when you notice that they're being made. And I think so often modern film viewers, they're very passive, they're very passive, and the films encourage them to be passive.
Well,
right?
It's absolutely true. And in those days, by the way, when film was just entering the popular consciousness as a form of entertainment, people were much more interactive with the film. They
were.
The only time I can think of a tremendously interactive time that I had in the theater was when I saw Alien in 1979.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
There were 600 people in the Cinerama theater, and everybody was experiencing it. And there's nothing like that. And that's also another thing that I really want students, they're so used to watching, even on their phone, they're watching films or their computers. The problem I have with that is first of all, it's not the way it's supposed to be seen.
Right.
But second of all, you're not doing it with the community.
Yes.
And that's what is really missing. And COVID pretty much put a stake, if
really-
you don't mind me saying, in the heart.
It really
of the-
did. Like, I felt like things were already going that way.
I know.
And yet, there was still this stalwart group of movie-going people, and then COVID really, put the kibosh on that. So I often think about, yes, the convenience of streaming is such a wonderful thing.
It is.
But then at the same time, what have we lost, right?
What have we lost?
And we've lost that communal aspect. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so cool that the Rats and People Motion Picture Orchestra is coming to play Nosferatu for us on November 7th at 6:15 p.m. in the Maryville Auditorium, okay? Because, as Germaine mentions, silent film was not silent at all, okay? So there would always be some kind of live accompaniment. Usually, in your small town theaters, you'd have a piano player or, a one-man band, something like that. But for something like Nosferatu, to have a full band playing bespoke music that goes along with what you're seeing on screen, it's really a magical experience. And I find that when the band comes, I watch the band about as much as I watch the movie. I'm watching them watch the movie because it's so fascinating to watch how the band works out their timing, not just with each other, but with the film. And to me, it's such a rare experience to be able to see a silent film the way it was meant to be seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And
you know what I'd love to do sometime is have, because I was not alive, of course, but I talked to many an old projectionist when I was a theater manager in college. And, they used to have acts that used to come on, and then you used to have some kind of short at the beginning. And when cartoons came in, you'd have a cartoon.
Right. Newsreel.
And newsreel. That's how people got their
news,
their visual news, of course.
Yeah.
And so I would love to be able to do that sometime. But no, this is a very special occasion. It's amazing that these people live in our neighborhood too.
Yes.
And you know what I'd love to do, and maybe we can do it, is sit them down and have a talk about. Wouldn't that be
that would be so cool?
It would be very cool.
Yeah. Last time they did do a little Q&A afterwards.
They did.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get them to join in this time too.
Students absolutely loved it.
Because I'll be leading that Q&A, so I'll just sort of invite them to join us. But the other thing that I want to touch on when it comes to Nosferatu, you mentioned the popularity of the vampire genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a huge vampire nerd as well. And when I say I'm a vampire nerd, I mean like all the way back to like the Greek tradition. Like I'm fascinated by the history of vampirism as a trope. And Nosferatu is really cool, especially for students nowadays, because Count Orlok is the archetype of a type of vampire that we don't see very often on screen anymore.
It gets changed dramatically by
Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi, right?
Kicks it off in 1931 with Dracula for the Universal Horror Series, Todd Browning's film. And then really since then, vampires have just gotten sexier and sexier and sexier, right? To the point that, I look at the vampires in Twilight and I'm like, well, they're barely vampiric, really.
Robert Pattinson said the same thing.
He did?
He absolutely hated doing that because he said it was not at all close to and you realize Bram Stoker was Irish and was a Brit. Okay, so they're he was not happy with doing that.
Yeah, and it's
they turned him into a nice guy.
Yeah. But Count Orlok, as played by Max Schreck, right? He's horrific looking.
He is.
And it's the archetype of the vampire as the plague bringer, as the lord of rats and plague and that sort of thing. So he's not sexy at all. However, he is extremely psychologically seductive, right? And so he has this sort of mind control power, which is common in vampire lore. But there's something so jarring about the fact that he's physically so repugnant and yet is drawing these young people
Well,
to him.
when you watch him, you can't stop looking at him.
No, you can't.
And the reason is because of the way he moves.
Mm.
I was also. Have you ever thought about this idea too that it's definitely a piece of its time because it's talking about Weimar Germany.
Yes.
And
right.
and this strong sense on the part of many that we're living in decadent times.
Yes.
And he is kind of, his character is kind of symbolic of all of that.
Very much so. He's this invader from a foreign land who's buying property in their neighborhood, and he brings the Black Death with him. So this, it makes it a pretty relevant movie. I love talking to students about the parallels between the COVID-19 pandemic and the plague that we see in the movie, because you will see people acting in this movie in many of the same ways that we saw people acting during the pandemic.
Well, you can imagine too. This is 1922.
Yes,
this is the last
Spanish
year of the
flu.
flu. So the flu went from 1918. It's not a Spanish flu, but it went from 1918 to 1922, and it's one of the ways that the whole pandemic thing enters the popular consciousness through art, and that's Nosferatu.
Yes,
and I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yes,
because we don't think of that. There's very few things that very few works of art that immediately looked at the plague, the flu pandemic of that particular time.
Yes,
because people just didn't want to think about it.
No, they really repressed it.
They repressed it, and very much so. You know what? He's always reminded me of the Shrek, Max Schreck's rendition of Nosferatu is Monk's The Scream.
And yes, that German expressionist painting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Monk's The Scream was not, in my view, about
the war.
No. It was about modern consciousness. It was, I think, more because Monk almost died of the flu. And so there's that famous portrait that he paints of himself, rehabbing, and he looks like the face in The Scream. So I think there's all kinds of interesting ways that this film we can contextualize this film.
Yeah. And kind of coming back to what you were saying about Weimar Germany, one of the things that I always like to bring up when I look at German Expressionism, particularly Nosferatu, is there's this really famous book of a film scholarship called From Caligari to Hitler, A Psychological History of the German Film by Siegfried Krakauer. And Krakauer's thesis, and this book came out in 1947, okay, so pretty hot on the heels of World War II. And in this book, Krakauer makes this incredibly groundbreaking argument that when you look back at the films that were produced during the Weimar Republic, right, when you look back at German Expressionist films like Nosferatu, you can see hints of a culture that is in crisis and that is perhaps ripe for being taken over by a charismatic, convincing political leader like Adolf Hitler. So I always think about that when I watch Nosferatu because,
absolutely,
there are parallels. This powerful being coming in and restructuring how life should be, right?
Yeah, and they're also Germany has become the plague victim.
Yes,
they become the pariah of Europe.
Yes,
and a lot of that, in large part, by the way, because of the United States and Woodrow Wilson making them a pariah.
Yes.
I'm not getting into politics, but nevertheless, I mean that's what happened. And so there's all of these, and I always tell students, film frequently, popular culture, which this was. Popular culture is a bellwether.
Oh yeah.
In other words, it's red flagging things all over, and frequently, and by the way, there's entertaining popular culture, and then there's a step above entertaining and also saying something really meaningful about the nature of the society at that time.
Yeah, and Nosferatu is one of those moments, I think, in cultural history where, when I think about this film, there's an incredible sequence where Nosferatu, Count Orlok, is on his way to the town where Hooter and Ellen live, and they begin to scapegoat this character, Knock, who's kind of the Renfield stand-in.
Right.
And they scapegoat him. He's under the psychological influence of the Count, but the entire town really literally gets their pitchforks and goes after this guy. Some critics have said that there are elements in Knock's visual presentation that stereotype him as Jewish, which
I would say
I see it.
I see it as well.
And so, when I see details like that in films like this, I really think that Krakauer was on to something. And
Murnau was on to something.
Yes, and this book, From Caligari to Hitler, it just really, it makes the entire German Expressionist period so much more fascinating culturally, I think.
I agree.
So
I agree.
That's
100%.
something else that this film brings to the table.
It's not that it's pretty recently, by the way, that the whole history of the film, the physical film itself, has come to light. And I think it was a woman who did the sort of definitive book on, wasn't it Lottie Eisner, I think, who did the whole history of the film itself, the whole thing with Florence Stoker, that whole court battle, and also what happened to the physical film and how it was ultimately preserved, and the kinds of cultural influence that the film had.
Yeah.
She's kind of an amazing. I wanted to make a shout out because it was a woman who brought this to light, and I think this is who brought the sort of history
of
the
haunted screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of underscore that because she's a film historian of kind of high repute, and so I wanted to make sure I understood.
She was writing about that stuff in the 50s.
Yes, I know. I know.
Yeah. So it's really interesting for being a relatively young narrative art. Film really, scholarly people took hold of it fairly early on.
They did.
And really started.
The surrealists took a hold of it really early on, and that's why that Monk. The Edvard Munch and really is a crucial connection to make because it is in many ways surrealistic.
Yeah, Nosferatu definitely is. And I mean, I know Buñuel and Dali with Un Chien Andalou.
Absolutely,
I teach every time I can. They felt, Salvador Dali, the great surrealist painter, he felt that film was the most surreal art form in terms of what you could do. Absolutely. And I think that sometimes we've gotten away from that, and I love to revisit these silent films where, the story is important, but it's not the main attraction, right? That there's other things happening in the film beyond simply what happens in the film.
And the other thing is one of the things that Scorsese and Elia Kazan were saying way back in the 1970s is that visual literacy absolutely needs to be taught, and not as just this fundamental. Well, it's fundamental, but not just as this. It's not an elementary school thing. We live in a world of screens, and we need to be much more literate as a culture and a society and as a civilization about what the screen is doing to us, and also what the screen can do. With regard to art. And to me, this seems to be the most relevant thing today because. Look at the two of us. We both have our screens here with us.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
And when you look at, and students too, they've got a phone, they've got an iPad, and if you look around the university campus, we got screens everywhere. So we get used to looking at screens, and we miss how to look, how to see, and how to see an image and what a filmmaker is trying to do.
Yeah, because there's a whole grammar, there's a whole language of film. And one of the things that I love most about the silent era, and one of the reasons why when I teach international film history, I start there and I stay there for a couple weeks, is because with film, you can really see the development of a narrative language in real time, right?
Very nice.
History of the novel, you have to go way back, right? If you wanted to do a comprehensive history of the novel for yourself as an individual, you would have your work cut out for you.
Yeah,
right?
well, yes, exactly.
Because just thousands of years of development. Whereas with film, it really only gets rolling at the tail end of the 19th century. And then we don't really have anything that a modern audience would recognize as a feature film until like the 1910s, 19-teens, around in there. So you really can trace the development of how they worked out how to tell stories on film, right? Because there are so many things that I think as, residents of this visually saturated society that we just assume that people automatically know. Like most of us can't remember the first time we watched TV, okay? And so we automatically have absorbed things like the 180-degree rule, right? About where you can position characters in a frame in order to be visually legible. Things like angles or lighting or shot length. So much of classical Hollywood cutting, which is largely what the film industry still uses today, is designed to erase the filmmaker's thumbprint on the film. Like, you're not supposed to notice the lighting, the editing, the angles. It's supposed to just seamlessly suck you into the movie. But for me, it's so interesting when you start to notice those things and start to be able to recognize the choices that the directors made and how they're motivated by the storytelling.
Well, the other thing I think too, the reason why I'm so attracted, why I love film so much, is also because it's a highly literary genre too. So you have the writer and you have the writer and the director. But the other thing that really attracts me to it, the same reason why I love bands and why I love orchestras and things like that, is because it's a highly cooperative.
Oh yeah.
It's a completely collaborative work of art where nowadays you literally have thousands of people working on a single film. And you that to me is kind of mysterious in a way, that kind of creative process,
that it all comes together,
comes together. And you have that's what I find really interesting, and sort of tracing that kind of collaborative process, because if you look, but you're absolutely right. I watch a movie, sometimes I see movies, I've seen some movies 10, 20, 30, 40 times, and I always watch it for something different. With when I lately watched Nosferatu, I just watched it for Max Schreck's movements, just because he choreographed his movements. He choreographed them just like Frankenstein and Boris Karloff choreographed his movements. He figured it all, the way he was going to move before he did it. Bela Lugosi, the same thing. He played it on stage, and he realized there was a major transition from the stage to the screen, and so he also choreographed his movements. There's a great deal of care. So it's really cool to watch films over and over again, to watch for a particular thing. Or
to focus on a particular aspect of what's happening or a particular performance.
The one thing too that I really emphasize to students is the difference between cinema and a cinematic performance and like just video. Right. And I think going back to Murnau, what you can really see, this is highly cinematic, meaning the emphasis is on movement. And on atmosphere. There's something always going on in the frame. And another person who was highly influenced by Murnau was Kurosawa. You can see it all over.
Oh, you can.
So and what I love too is you can actually trace, as you say, you can trace the influences. You can trace, oh my God, you're watching a movie. Oh my God, I saw that. In Nosferatu.
It's being visually quoted by this other director. That's one of the things is I always tell people that, there's kind of two ways to enjoy Quentin Tarantino movies. There's the surface level, which, fun, ultra-violence, whatever. But the more of a film nerd you are, the more interesting his films become.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he is almost always in every frame quoting or referencing.
Absolutely.
Or, it's really stunning thing. Both sort of his knowledge of film history, but also his ability to repurpose pieces of film history toward his own narrative ends.
So what do we call that? Because in literature, we call it intertextuality.
I think I would call it intertextuality. I'd also call it maybe pastiche.
Yeah.
You know, or sometimes it's an homage. Rarely is it a parody when it comes to Tarantino. But yeah, there is sort of an intertextuality within film, too.
Oh, and it's so obvious.
And if we think of the original root of the word text, you know, it's the same Latin root as texture or textile. So it's a weaving together.
It's a weaving together.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
so I never have a problem calling movies text for that reason. So yeah, I'd say intertextuality.
Well, they're definitely based on
Yeah,
text.
they're definitely. I mean, to this day, the blockbuster movies are almost always adaptations of something. I mean, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm a huge comic book nerd. I have been since I was 12. And it's so fun to watch the ways that these really obscure storylines from my childhood are being repurposed and retold into these movies. And yet people think that it's all new.
Oh, I
And
know.
It's like, it's not. All of
I
this
know.
is
That's
an
what's really
adaptation.
fun to show students too, that there is these things are not brand new.
No.
and this
Nothing, there's nothing new under the sun.
no. They always are shocked when I say there are very few brand new, spanking new stories.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think so often people want to fall into the trap of, well, this is the first time this has happened. And, you know, history shows us again and again that's not the case. And I personally love to find the antecedents or the ancestors
Oh, I do too.
of the new stuff I love, because
I do
it
too.
makes me feel like I'm being let in on a little secret, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
Jess,
Mm.
this was so fun.
Yeah.
This was so fun, and I hope we can do this again.
Yes, very
Okay.
much so.
Hope we can do this again. I think we do want to do it again. I think we might be doing it again in October.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have some, we want to talk about ghost stories.
Yes,
Isn't
we
that
want
right?
to. We want to talk about ghost stories, right?
Mhm,
It's
spooky season.
spooky season.
Yeah.
Right. I'm doing for the film series. I'm doing for the students. I'm doing The Changeling,
Mm.
which is a very fine ghost story. So we want to talk about that in October, and then we have another one coming up. I hope in October too, which is the sociology of baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Which
yeah.
is a colleague of mine.
Dr. Kemp Bousman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's been working on this and thinking about this, and he and I have been wanting to teach a course on this. But he really has been working on it a very long time.
Yes.
And we live in a city, St. Louis, Missouri, that is just
Baseball Central.
baseball central, but especially for the Negro Leagues. So that's really one of the things we want to emphasize.
That's so cool.
So anyway, I really want to thank you.
Oh, yeah. It was my
From
pleasure.
from the bottom of my heart. We
Yeah.
could probably do this for another couple hours.
We could, but I don't know. I don't know, you know. But I really encourage everybody to come on out on November 7th and 6:15 p.m. Maryville Auditorium, Nosferatu and the Rats.
And it's
People.
absolutely for free.
100% free. Tell your friends, tell your family, bring everyone
Yeah.
to see this one-of-a-kind thing. You will not regret it, I promise.
Yeah, very good. And we also want to thank the Meatheart family
Yes.
who is helping us to do this. I am the director of the Meatheart Lectures, and the Meatheart family is an old alumni family, and they make these kinds of things possible. Jess also does a marvelous poetic series, a writing series for us in the spring called Rites of Spring. And we'll probably come back with a podcast on all of that as
Yeah.
well. And that makes Mrs. Meatheart's family makes that possible
Yeah,
too.
so amazing.
again,
resource.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.